Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and survivor of the zombie apocalypse. Welcome to my thoughts on The Walking Dead. This will be a semi-regular series in which I discuss the latest episodes of AMC's The Walking Dead. Haven't decided if I'm going to do one of these every week or just semi-regularly whenever I feel like it, but for now, we're doing it. We are right now in between episodes 2 and 3 of Season 9. So Walking Dead has recently returned. Also with the startling announcement that Rick Grimes, Andrew Lincoln, will be leaving the show, I guess about halfway through the season, which is an odd announcement to make. Not sure if he's going to get killed off, if he's just going to retire from it, what's going on. I'm kind of the opinion that the show probably should have ended at the end of last season. That was a great stopping point, or maybe not great, but probably as good as the show was going to get for a stopping point. It's gotten very long in the tooth. I wouldn't say I've been hate watching it. I might say I've been hate watching it. I don't hate the show. I'm a fan. I've been a fan since whenever it started, 2010. I was a fan of the show first, and then I got into the comics, although I stopped once I caught up to about, I think it was the arc after the Negan arc, so it started the Whisperers. That was when I stopped keeping up with the comic. So that's as far as I've gotten, which is about as far as the show has gotten now. But if you've read my written recaps in the past, I like to do recaps of just the big shows I'm watching. So I've done them for Westworld and Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead. But I figure with this season, I would start just kind of pivoting to video and just instead of doing a written recap, just talk about the shows, and that way we can have kind of discussions and comments at the bottom. So let's go with episode 1. I'll go ahead and do both episodes with this video. Let's start with episode 1, A New Beginning, directed by Greg Nicotero, and I've got a let's see here. There we go. I have some visuals here. I actually had to go back to OBS to record this because apparently in Streamlabs you cannot do the manual slideshow yet for some reason. Just overlooked that you can't set up the hotkeys properly. Oh well, so OBS works fine, hopefully. So this represents a big change in the show. We've got a new showrunner now, which the show has been through quite a few showrunners at the moment. And it's definitely a new narrative direction. We've defeated Negan at the end of last season, which lasted, I believe, 2 full seasons with the war with the Saviors, and it's really been the Achilles heel of the entire show, has been pacing. Walking Dead has a severe problem with pacing. It tends to drag on just about everything it does, every plot thread, every location, every situation, every villain, for longer than it needs to be. And none of those things are inherently bad when they're introduced, and they can be a lot of fun. It's just that they last way too long. It happened with the governor, it happened with the prison, it happened with the farm, definitely happened with Negan, where these things just last too long. We finally did get a bow on it last season. We officially defeated Negan with a very contrived... You know what? I don't even want to talk about Season 8 that much. If you wanted my thoughts on it, you can go to my website at roguewatson.com and read all about my thoughts there. In fact, I have a lot of experience writing about The Walking Dead. If you go to a little website called polygon.com, I actually wrote their weekly Walking Dead recaps for every episode for, let's see, it would have been 2 years ago, so that would have been season 7, the 2016 to 2017 season, I think is how the years lined up, as well as a bunch of op-eds and things. So I've got a bunch of work out there of The Walking Dead. So I'm invested in the show. I'm going to keep watching, and I like talking about it. I think it's just an interesting thing to talk about. And this first episode, I like the character moments quite a bit. I think the writing has actually gotten better in a lot of ways, especially with the inner character stuff. I think that's worked really well. It's just that it's going through this really weird transition where it doesn't have a villain right now, so we're kind of doing this social experiment of bringing our groups together, our communities of the Kingdom, the Hilltop, Alexandria, and now I don't know if I've always called it like Savior HQ, Sanctuary. I guess that's the place, Sanctuary. These communities have to come together to basically rebuild society, which is kind of an interesting thing to look at for the show. Obviously, the show has transitioned quite a bit from the season 5-6 arc when they were all basically going from the prison to Alexandria, the last place they were on the road. And now we're all of a sudden we've got everything is established, and yet zombies are still a problem for our crew. And it's funny how herds are only really a problem when the writers need them to be a problem. It wasn't really a huge problem during the war with the Saviors. They kind of weaponized the undead quite a bit, but otherwise it was mainly just war with humans. And now that we don't no longer have war with the humans, of course, zombie herds are now a thing. I did find it very funny and entertaining that zombie herds are basically treated as hurricanes now. I forgot what the actual names of them were, but they literally called them, Henrietta is on their way or something. So it was like the zombies are like a natural disaster in the world, which I think would be a funny concept if it led there. So partly what I do with my recaps is I kind of go in order of what happened, just to make it easy to talk about it. So the first thing they did is, on their path to rebuilding society, is they go to, I think, D.C., because they're in Virginia, so this is all very New England territory now at this point. We've gotten far removed from Atlanta, where the series started. And I guess they go to, like, the Smithsonian. I might have missed the exact museum. And they, there's a lot of nice little character moments. And their entire goal is to loot, I guess, farming equipment. Because one thing the zombie apocalypse does is it just kind of resets your technology into a whole previous era, because we just don't have electronics and those kind of things. So we have to go back to essentially like 19th century technology, including farming equipment like just plows and things. So that's actually pretty smart. Let's go to the museum where they actually have these things. Like, I thought that was actually a really smart idea and concept. The whole glass ceiling floor thing was really contrived and stupid, though. Again, and the show just painstakingly draws it out. Like, the glass is cracking, and they're taking forever to get across. And it's just that something's gonna happen. And when it does, it's not a big deal at all. You think, well, are they going to kill Ezekiel off here? Is he going to get bit? No, he's just going to kind of flail around. And I was a little upset with Ezekiel here because I don't like him, save the plow. It's like, dude, your life's worth more than that. Come on now. I mean, I appreciate you being this lawful good, hero, but come on. I did really like the sudden blooming romance relationship between Carol and Ezekiel, though. I thought that was actually really sweet. I thought they play off each other really well, and I'll mention that at the end when I do my winners and losers. It's something I do with my recaps on my thoughts, as I do a winners losers column. I don't rate the episodes, but I just do that as a kind of a summary. But I like them together. I thought that was a little funny thing. I don't think they hinted at that at all last season, but I think we are supposed to, and they might have mentioned this, I might have just missed it, that some time has passed between when the last season ended and this one began, and it's kind of, they've played around with that sometimes, where some seasons start off like the next day, and other times it's like months later. And I think this is a months later case. What was my next slide here, as I remember? My next slide is not working at the moment. Why did I mess up my hotkey? OBS, I told you how I wanted this to go down. Nope, says right, left. Image slideshow, okay. There we go. Okay. So, as you can tell, I'm working with image slideshows for the first time. On the way back from the museum, the bridge has been destroyed, so they can't, and, physical travel is obviously the lifeblood of, trade and all that to keeping these communities together, so that's a problem that bleeds into the next episode. But for now, they have to take basically the long way back, and they get caught kind of in, like, mud, I guess, and the zombies are approaching. This is kind of a weird scene, too, because you think, I don't know, you've got, like, literally all your max-level badasses here. You've got Michonne, you've got Darrell, you've got Rick. Do we really need to just flee from a dozen zombies anymore? Like, can't we just turn around and fucking take them out? Like, I've seen this crew do that before. Like, go through hordes of zombies. It's very frustrating where sometimes I don't feel like we get enough information where we feel like, okay, wait, was this a we need to flee scenario, or is this a we can turn around and fight scenario? Because most of these feel like we can turn around and fight. Now, they have done giant hordes in the show before where you're like, oh shit, yeah, we need to get out of here. But this seemed like one where we could have just turned and fought them off. But they don't. They run. And Ken, our red shirt, no idea who this character is. I think he literally just appeared this episode. If he did appear last season, then let me know in the comments, and I might have just missed it. But to me, he's just a complete red shirt. It's like, I gotta save the horses, which is kind of shitty. They're gonna flee and just leave the horses, and we've known in the past horses definitely are a delicacy for zombies. So he goes back, tries to save the horses. He gets bitten. Everybody else comes back and able to save him, but he ends up dying from his wounds, and Maggie actually has to do the coup de grace. And so Ken dies. Poor Ken. Ken doesn't matter, but what he does is creates a ordeal for Maggie to deal with back at the hilltop, because this was a young, teenager kid, I guess, who wanted to tag along, and he died, and now she has to go tell the parents, and the parents are not happy. They are understandably upset with Maggie, and Gregory ends up taking advantage of this situation. Fucking Snake Gregory, who is really a bit of a Disney villain. He's so ridiculously scheming and evil and just incredibly easy to hate, which doesn't necessarily make him a bad character, but it is kind of a goofy character. Like, he's not very layered or complex or anything like that. He's very much like, with Gregory, you know exactly how he's going to act and how he's feeling in every single scenario and scene. So it gets pretty tiresome because he's been hanging on for seasons and seasons now. Thankfully, that is resolved at the end of this season. But what happens is Gregory convinces the recovering alcoholic father by giving him a drink and saying, "Hey, we need to do something about this. I hate Maggie. You should hate Maggie. Let's get something going here." And in the next scene, we see Maggie weirdly walking the baby in the dead of night. I guess it was supposed to be like she's evening going home maybe or something, but it was like straight up. It looked like midnight. She's just got the baby out for a stroll, which was weird. And Gregory tells her, you need to go check on some bullshit story. Glenn's gravestone has been defaced or something. Something he tells her that knowing that she would immediately make a beeline for there. And she does, because I don't know why you would believe anything Gregory says, but sure. And she gets attacked by the dad, like in a mask, and it's pretty like terrifying, because this guy's a big dude. Thankfully, he's, I guess, drunk and incompetent, and then a bunch of friends, I think like Jesus and Enid, come and save her from that ordeal. And she ends up imprisoning the dad. I guess we actually find that later. What she immediately does is go confront Gregory. And Gregory just straight up admits, I think that's my next slide here. Yeah. Gregory doesn't really deny anything. And, for the whole time he's been this villain of not like a Negan or a Governor where he's really a take charge. He's very much that smarmy, like behind the scenes, like sniveling, that kind of a villain. So it was very odd for him to just admit how he basically did this, kind of. But what he does is he just attacks her. Like, he's like, well, fuck it, this is my backup plan. And his backup plan is just to pull a knife and fucking try to kill her right there, which is a pretty awful plan, and frankly not very lined up with his character, who is all about like using politics and manipulation and scheming to get his way. So this was very weird, like step up for his character, I guess. I mean, in the end, I'm glad the show dealt with him, but it felt very strange for him to act this way. Obviously, Maggie is a complete badass and overpowers him. Gregory might be somewhat competent at scheming, even though all of his schemes fail. But he is definitely not competent at stabbing anybody. So she, instead of killing him, which I thought would actually happen here, I thought she would end up killing him in self-defense right here. And that would actually lead her to be much more justified in what she ends up doing, which is hanging him, like a public hanging. I believe that night, like straight up just, while you're in that, like, vengeance rage mode. And, it's not exactly well received by the public. Hangings in general probably are kind of questionable, but it gets to the fact that, and I think Michonne has been here, and she's talking to Maggie about, like, hey, we need to, like, write a constitution or some kind of declaration of laws, because, like, right now it's just basically whatever Rick says and whatever Maggie says, and even Rick and Maggie don't agree on things. Like, whatever you guys say goes, and that's tyranny. Like, you need to be careful, Maggie. I like Maggie a lot, and I think this is a good thing for her character to go through, is being in charge, but having to really worry about, like, the laws and the will of the people, because I don't know if anybody complained about her killing Gregory, but the fact that Gregory didn't get a trial and didn't get, all those due process things that, in regular civilization that we're uh, used to. Obviously, zombie apocalypse is a different situation, but we're also at the point of trying to rebuild society. So that's part of rebuilding society is, in theory, coming up with a actual code of laws. Because otherwise, you're just Negan. You're all Negan, and you're doing, it's tyranny. It's autocrats, which I don't think Maggie is, and I think this is her kind of peak tyranny, and then I think she'll be pulled back from the brink of this pretty well. Although her weakness is definitely wanting to kill Negan also. Um, I think that's pretty much all that happens here. Let's see, what are my notes? Okay, the episode also definitely spoke to animosity between the saviors and the others, especially the Hilltop. So it's not, it's not a Cold War, but it's definitely frosty feelings, which is like the next step below Cold War. The saviors and the Hilltop is the provider of food. They're the breadbasket. So they're trading food to the saviors, and the saviors, in theory, would trade fuel. But for some reason, the fuel hasn't made it to the Hilltop, and now Maggie says, like, look, I don't want to, they're not getting any food unless we get our fuel. So she does not like them, and that's definitely something that's going to play out, I think, through the rest of the season. It certainly does in episode 2 of, trying to integrate essentially this conquered society into your society, which is a thing that is very difficult to do in history and in, games like Civilization or something. But you're trying to get the subjugated people. Yeah, yes, they surrendered, but you want to give them some autonomy while still bringing them into the fold, and that's a very tricky line to walk. And there's some interesting conversations between her and Rick towards the end, I think, where it's really her being like, look, you need to, respect my authority, and we're going to have differences of opinions here, and, you're not always right, but I think Maggie also has to know that she's not always right, and that's something that I think there's a lot of good conversations between her and Jesus in the next episode where he basically tells her that as a confidant. So I like what they're doing with Maggie a lot in this episode. I think it's working quite well. We don't have to stare at her doing that. What was this slide? Okay, so Darrell is actually given a little bit more to do this season, which is nice because Darrell has been super underused throughout the last, I would say several years, but especially with the war with Negan, he's been very underused. He was just captured for a while, and his whole arc was just he was pissed off at the Saviors for capturing him and torturing him, and he kind of was just a fucking, I don't know, like he was celebrated for his bad boyness like early on in the season, and he was a fan favorite, and now I feel like he is bemoaned for his bad boyness. Like it just feels petulant and immature, and it's getting everybody into trouble. You could almost say like he was the one that freed the Saviors from the plan that they when they were at war, when they surrounded them with walkers. So Darrell's star rating has fallen quite a bit. I feel like this is an upward trajectory for him, but on the other hand, he's also spent the time, like, in terms of like character development, I think it's good, but in this episode particularly, he didn't come off very well. Yes, it's nice seeing him on his motorcycle, like stabbing zombies with a spear and all that. It's always good to see Darrell motorcycle reunited finally. But he's just kind of petulant and whiny about he doesn't want to be in charge of the sanctuary, which granted that is pretty shitty of them to put like Darrell in the sanctuary. Like, don't, dude, he's got some fucking feelings about this place. But he just is refusing to move forward with this. He will not let it go. And even like Maggie won't let it go between Negan, but still she is trying to like move forward, even though, because she's got at least a people to worry about herself. Darrell like needs something because right now he's just a pain in the ass. He is like the attack dog that's on a leash by Rick, and frequently has bitten Rick in the past when they actually got to blows at one point. So I wasn't a huge fan of Darrell in this episode, but with the caveat that I think I might like what they're doing with him. I guess we will see. All right, let's do my winners and losers for episode 1. Winners, Ezekiel and Carol. I really liked their relationship together. I thought it was very sweet. They play off each other very well. Ezekiel is the the poet, the romantic. He's just, everything he says is just eloquent and beautiful, and I think he's a great character. He's just super nice and loyal and sweet, all those great qualities. And then Carol is like the stoic, pragmatic badass, and that juxtaposition just plays off itself so beautifully, and they're great together. It feels like they have some good chemistry together too between the two actors. It's not like hot and passionate or anything, but it feels natural. Kind of the way that Michonne and Rick feels natural. I never thought that their chemistry was super hot and heavy, but it just feels like, it feels like that coupling where they started out with friends for a while and they just kind of naturally like came together. That's kind of what this feels like. So I really like this relationship. My other winner was Maggie, as I mentioned. Maggie gets a huge focus on this episode and what looks like maybe the whole season as a legitimate ruler of one of these communities at the same level as Rick. She can, talk to Rick about governing and politics, and she still has very personal investments in Negan, and obviously has that whole exchange with Gregory. So I think that it's doing a lot of good for her character. She's had a lot to do this episode, and I really like how it plays out. My losers are Gregory. Obviously, he's pretty much a loser every time he comes up. And losers aren't necessarily characters I hate. It's just that characters that I think that fare badly in the episode. So I should clarify. Winners are characters that fare very well or that I enjoyed in that episode, and the losers is the opposite of that. Gregory, it just feels like him attacking Carol was kind of out of character. Just brandishing a knife and going after her in the end. And then obviously the result of it being hanged and killed, which, hey, I'm super happy that they killed off Gregory. Make no mistake. I'm glad we're not dealing with that bullshit anymore. Let's get rid of that subplot. It was dumb. It hung on too long. And if that's the showrunners going, look, we're going to tie this up right away, then I am thumbs up with that maneuver, and I'm liking those showrunners. My other loser is Darrell. I guess I have to go back a slide. It's in the background in this one. It's weird to put him as a loser because I like the more development of Darrell in this season so far, but in this episode he comes off just kind of whiny and annoying, I think, in the end. This episode will be a little longer because, and as I said, I haven't determined if I'm going to do one of these every week. If you all end up liking them, and please let me know in the comments. I could make it a weekly thing. Otherwise, I could just do it every once in a while to recap several episodes. So in this case, I will be recapping episode 2 right now. Episode 2, The Bridge, directed by Daisy von Schurler-Mayer. What happened in episode 1 is the bridge was destroyed. So in episode 2, they have to fix the bridge, and that's the entire focus of this episode, is them, coming together for a major construction project, which I don't think is something we've seen too often in the show. And they're out in the wild, so it's not a, protected place like all the communities are. And the way they protect it is through outposts surrounding the area with noise alarms that can redirect herds, which is very clever. And you would think at now they are very organized about all of this, and they are. The problem is, of course, the people. Most of these sites are fine. I forget the character. Jerry is one of the alarms. The other is Tara. And unfortunately, one of the alarms is this person right here, who I don't... I watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I know him as the villain through, I think, last season. He was one of the villains in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I don't actually know what the hell his character name was or who the actor is particularly. So I'm just going to call him the S.H.I.E.L.D. villain. So S.H.I.E.L.D. villain guy is just a pain in the ass. He's trying to steal more water. He just gets in a fist fight with Darrell because, again, Darrell's that attack dog who just instantly has just the worst kind of opinion when it comes to any kind of saviors. And this altercation is meaningful because later S.H.I.E.L.D. villain guy is responsible for not being able to set his alarm. We don't actually know if it's just his incompetence or he actually does have animosity or what the deal was. We can kind of assume one way or the other. There's a note was like, it was a solar walkie-talkie. Don't you realize that? And it kind of doesn't matter, but he fucked it up anyway. And a herd ends up attacking our workforce. I think I've got a slide there. Okay. Specifically the one that Aaron is at with just a bunch of, at this point I'm not going to call them red shirts, but there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people now with all these communities coming together that aren't our main people. NPCs, as you will. They are like lashing together giant logs. There's a whole like lumberyard system here apparently, because they're like lashing together giant logs that they've taken down from trees in order to rebuild. Like they got a serious system. And unfortunately, when the undead show up, the walkers, I guess I should say, Aaron gets pinned beneath one of the logs, so he's trapped. Darrell actually gets to spring into motion and go into kind of badass mode. Like he's brandishing dual blades, like just Assassin's Creed style, and stabbing walkers left and right. That was kind of a cool like heroic moment. I'm always a sucker for just cool like comic book action scenes, which Walking does do every once in a while. And that was kind of a neat scene. I was like, all right, yeah, he's brandishing these knives and just stabbing dudes. And I'm like, that's an example of what I mentioned with the last one, is like, why didn't they just turn around and fight? And they do that here. It's like, well, when push comes to shove, we can just fight. And obviously it is more dangerous, but still, you guys are badasses at killing walkers in almost every single context, even when there's a pretty good sized herd. Unfortunately, Aaron's arm is like crushed. It is fucked up. So he has to end up going to the medical facilities, which Sadiq was there, and we know from early in the episode that Sadiq is training Enid to be a nurse, or a doctor, I guess, straight up doctor. Fuck that, fuck nurse. She is doing the surgery, which is cool because I think Enid definitely needed something to do. If you're going to keep her around, you can't just have her be like Maggie's secretary, I don't think. You could, but I like that she's being given this bigger role, and certainly it makes sense in this society. The first thing you want your doctor to do when he has any time is to teach somebody else those fucking skills, because that is like the number one skill to have in a post-apocalyptic society. Unfortunately, he leaves. She's kind of still green at the job, and they show up with Aaron here, and she immediately decides, oh, we got to amputate. And I'm thinking, oh no, that can't be right. I need a second opinion. Like, no, don't amputate. Unfortunately, we are at 19th century medicine, in addition to 19th century everything else. And she does. She fucking cuts his arm off. No sedation, no anything. It's... Boy, that was a little squeamish. Like, they cut away when they did, but, man, poor Aaron. Like, this dude has been steadfast. He's been loyal to our group ever since he first recruited them to go to Alexandria, when they were super, like, if you remember, that was like back in season 5 or something. They were very suspicious of him. He's been nothing but the nicest guy, the hardest worker, and he just gets shit on all the time by the writers. He lost his boyfriend, fiance, I'm not sure what the relationship quite was, in the war. He was like one of the only casualties of the war with Negan towards the end. He got beat up by saviors pretty viciously, and Rick just had to kind of stand there and watch him. And now he gets his fucking arm cut off. Like, God, that sucks. I felt so bad for him. He's a great character, and he just gets punished, like, left and right. And he was still great even after this happened. He was, like, whispering, like, oh, it was worth it. It was worth it, Rick. I might have lost Mom, but I still love you guys. It's like, fuck. He's... This show does not deserve Aaron. Aaron's amazing. That's my Aaron rant. I felt so bad for him. My heart was just breaking. So they find out that the missed alarm was due to our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. villain character. I don't remember his name. And I love this still. Darrell responds just by kicking his fucking ass, like, which he did in the first one. He would have absolutely beat the shit out of him. And this guy's like a tough dude. Like, he played this very strong villain, and the actor kind of looks like he'd definitely be able to, he'd be like a diehard villain or something. And Darrell just fucking clocks him. He's got no patience. Interestingly, and Carol's the one that actually takes him, breaks him down a bit, like, hey, like, fucking put a leash on it. I did like the exchange when Rick finally came up and actually talked to S.H.I.E.L.D. villain guy and said, like, oh, I know people like you. When I was a cop, I had you in the back of my car all the time, and it was a really fun, good exchange where we got to see Rick, actually talk about his previous life before all this happened, and the fact that he did know characters like, and he's basically saying, like, you're a bad human being, and you're never gonna, you're not taking any blame for yourself. You're just a pissant, like regular, the usual suspect. Really kind of cruel. And at one point, the guy's like, I'm not going to take this. He's like, oh, yes, you are. You're going to sit here and listen to this. And Rick just fucking gives him the third degree. I really liked that scene a lot. We got to see Rick kind of be a dick, but in a good way. And he basically bans the guy. He doesn't kill him, which I think that's probably the best solution there. Is just like this guy is a problem, and you can't. You're not gonna really jail him, I guess, but just kick him out of the group. Like banishment is a pretty bad punishment here, and the guy's just like, "Oh fuck you, I'm gonna leave. I'm not even gonna wait till morning." So bye. What else is going on? Ezekiel and Carol are still with their relationship, which is nice. Carol's trying on the ring, and Ezekiel's like, "I wrote a speech." I like that. That was pretty funny. I thought it was weird. The father Gabe and are we calling her Anne or Jadis? I'm not sure. That character. I don't think I have a slide for it, but that relationship was very weird. She comes on really strong to him, and he's just a nice person that's interested in people. He makes a good priest because that's what he does is just talks to people. I did notice. Funny because I forgot about what had happened to him last season, and he's got that eye, and I think is what had happened? Did he get infected by it or something? That he had that weird subplot where he tried to escape with the other character and got captured again, and he got his eye fucked up somehow. But I thought that was a good nod to that, is the fact that he's got this eye that he basically is half blind from it. I think he had he was sick actually. He was just sick, and he was so sick it lost half his eye, which was weird. That felt like a really weird thing, I think, and turns out maybe she does have some alternative ulterior motions there. As we see towards the end of the episode, where she's like flagging down the helicopter that we've seen, so we don't know what her deal is. She went from kind of a complex, interesting character in that she was just really weird and we didn't know what her deal was, and I feel like as we've learned more about her, she becomes less interesting, and now she's just kind of a character who's a little weird, which is unfortunate. She's lost that mystique. And then Father Gabe, I guess, is going to be used for that for some reason, which is fine. I didn't like his subplot last season, so maybe they'll find something for him to do here. What is my next slide? Okay, Hilltop. This was the big situation. Jesus comes back. Michonne had talked to Maggie at the first episode and seemed to kind of butt heads quite a bit. And Michonne was pretty gentle about it, but Maggie was just like, you know what? I don't need to hear this right now. But Michonne talks to Jesus and says, she listens to you. You can actually talk to her and tell her things. And she's right, because that is pretty much the only person that Maggie listens to in terms of advice. It's basically, he's basically her confidant at this point. And so he talks to her about, look, and it's the dad character here. He's our blacksmith. We got that farm equipment. He needs to repair that. He's the one that's going to get us all the food, and he's a linchpin in our society. Maybe you need to talk to him and see, we can't keep him locked up forever. And I'm not sure. I feel like there's supposed to be some time lapse here, right? Let me know in the comments that it sounded like he was actually locked up for quite a while. This wasn't the next day or anything. I don't know if it was a month or weeks or what went by, but it seemed like there was definitely some time elapse that occurred. Well, you know what? Obviously, some time did occur because they're in the middle of rebuilding that bridge. So there was a time jump between last season episode 1 and another time jump between this episode and the other one. And maybe that's how we're gonna roll. It feels weird because I think the last 2 seasons it was literally we had at one point we had half a season all take place in the same day. It was very much our characters all split up and do it. And now it's the opposite, where it's now we've got this whole macro level society that we're following, and so we can just pass time like crazy. But anyway, so he's been locked up for a while. The wife hasn't even seen him, and so Jesus finally says, look, Maggie, you need to kind of talk to this guy and make a decision on this, and not just leave him imprisoned indefinitely without, a trial or anything of that nature. And she does. She listens to Jesus ultimately and talks to him and really has a heartfelt conversation. And she notes that her father, which was Herschel, was a recovering alcoholic, which I think has been established in the show previously. At this point, it's been seasons since Herschel died. Rest in peace, Rick Wilson, I think was his name. Scott Wilson. Shoot. Recently passed away. And she kind of has that connection with this father character, and he seems, and the actor does a good job of selling this. He seems legitimately remorseful and maybe rehabilitated, but certainly it was definitely a crime of passion, I guess, and that he's not a criminal. And she mentions the fact that if her father hadn't been given a second chance, then that would have been bad for everybody. So she ultimately lets him out. I forget if she puts him into parole or something. probably. But this is, already we're seeing the progress made from immediately hanging Gregory, who did, try to knife her and everything, which this guy tried to kill her too. But, and there's a difference, and she even mentions that difference specifically to her, I forget who she's talking to, but, and obviously to us, the audience, is she mentions the difference is like, no, Gregory, we gave him chance after chance after chance of him just constantly fucking up and siding with the wrong people and trying to undermine the authority and even like straight up like insurrection, rebellion. And then finally that was the last straw, was literally like, inciting this guy to kill her and then literally trying to kill her himself. Whereas this guy, basically a first offense. And so the punishment is just maybe some kind of a parole system, but the important thing is he can be back on doing his blacksmithing job. And that could also be a funny commentary on how if you are somebody in society, then your sentence is lighter, because he was a very important, think about if your town doctor had done something bad, not like heinous, but like, had gotten drunk and stole something or did something, if they was like the only town doctor versus if just, some, homeless guy in your society did that, that's technically everybody should be treated equally, but especially in this situation where you're like, this guy is really important to us being able to feed the rest of the people, then yeah, he's going to have to be let out. So I thought, nobody mentioned that, but I thought that was something I kept in mind. What else happened in this episode? Okay, I just have a slide of, because I really liked Ezekiel and Carol. They're so nice together and sweet. I loved it a lot. Ah, yes. Negan is there. So throughout the episode, Rick is obviously talking to somebody, and it turns out at the end he is talking to Negan, who is in jail for life. That was a big like oddly start of their like official society. Is like, we're not going to just kill everybody. We are going to actually imprison you as like just a horrible war criminal and murderer. There hasn't been a trial list of crimes or anything. He's just in jail. And it's an interesting conversation because Negan really gets to Rick. Like very few people can. Rick is, very much giving shit to people right back, and we even heard that, he dressed down that S.H.I.E.L.D. villain character. But Negan can really get to him. He mentions Carl by name, which Rick obviously is upset very much by that. You don't get to say his name, kind of a thing. And then he mentions, and Rick's, it sounds a lot like, what we think is like, who are you convincing here, Rick? You're trying to convince Negan, or you're trying to convince yourself. And Negan kind of calls him out on that in terms like, you're not building the bridge and making the society. You're just prepping everything for my eventual return. So Negan has not been broken at all. I don't know how long he's been in this prison, but he is still very much like, I've got this. I'm going to get out and I'm going to get back on top. So that's interesting. And I don't want to spoil too much of the comics. And I haven't not read much past this point. At this point, the show is almost caught up to where I am on the comics. I don't know if I'll continue reading the comics or not. But I think Negan does stick around for a while, and I think he might even end up kind of joining Rick's crew as an official member with, a very interesting, complex history there. So I don't think they're going towards this, oh man, are we really keeping Negan around as this potential villain? I don't think that's what happens, but that's also me using some, like, meta-knowledge of the comics, and maybe the show does do that, but I hope it doesn't. Certainly we've been through that before, and I hope Negan is just treated as this, this kind of character development for Rick. That being said, if Rick ends up leaving the show, which they all say he will midway through the season, then I don't see any purpose for Negan sticking around, because Negan is there as a interesting foil and development for Rick, and vice versa. If Rick's not around, I don't know if I want Negan to stick around. I don't really see the point of that. And really, if Rick leaves and Negan stays, then it almost seems like Negan will be possibly usurping his role. So given that we know Rick is leaving, I could see the result being that we lose Negan as well. Maybe something happens where Maggie ends up, sending an assassin squad to go do it, or they have a trial and it ends up like he'll have a parole, and Maggie freaks out, or something happens. I don't know. I would see, if Rick leaves, which I guess he's going to, then I need them to probably put a final bow on Negan as well, because I like the idea of Negan sticking around, but only if Rick is also sticking around ultimately. Winners and losers. I don't believe I have a slide for that. No, we're back to the front. Winners here, Maggie. I think she continues to do awesome. These first two episodes have very much been focused on Maggie. She was all wrath last week and vengeance, and here she's more merciful and nuanced, and I think that's a great arc for her to go through already in just these first 2 episodes. If the show is grooming her as the new Rick, I might be okay with that. I think Lauren Cohen is awesome, and she's been a great character throughout, all the way since season 2. I could see her filling that role as the ultimate like leader of everyone. And I think it would be interesting because she's not perfect. She's not, and Jesus would be a great confidant for that, because he even mentions like nobody's perfect, you're not perfect, but I still trust you to make the right decisions. And I think I would agree with that. Winner, Rick. I really liked seeing Rick dressed down, our S.H.I.E.L.D. villain guy. I thought that was a great fucking scene. Him basically trying to walk around and just be the glue that keeps everyone together while Darrell constantly keeps them apart. I don't think I'm going to put Darrell in my losers column again, because it would just be for the same reason, where he's just kind of a pain in the ass. I really need to see Darrell. Like, are you going to turn Darrell into a villain, or what's going on here? Like, you need to do, I don't know. Darrell's becoming... He was already not very well written or well liked in the last 2 seasons, I would say. And I don't know how I feel about him right now. I like that they seem to be doing something with him, but are you making him like an antagonist? Or is something else going to go on? He needs something. He's the loaded gun, and you need to point him in the direction. If there's no enemy to fight, then he just seems to be fighting internally, and that has been a problem. So you need to make him like get on that motorcycle and go out and find a problem to deal with, I guess, because that's what he's good at. Losers, Aaron. I'm so sorry, Aaron. I don't want to do this to you, but you're in the losers column because you got so screwed once again. I feel so bad for you, but you lost your arm, and that sucks. We lost a whole character in the beginning, and I didn't care much about that, but we just lose an arm here, and that's much more devastating. Aaron, I feel so bad for you. Hopefully you can come back from this and be another great, just a good character. I don't know what's in store, but I wish he would not be the series punching bag also, because I feel really bad for him. I think that is going to do it for my lengthy thoughts on The Walking Dead Season 9, Episodes 1 and 2. If you do like this content, let me know. Please let me know just all your thoughts of the show in general, Season 9, and any specific things in the episodes. I'm sure I messed things up, so please point that out in the comments below. If you do like my video content, you can support me via patreon.com/RogueWatson if you'd like. I will see you all next time. Bye.